In this second lesson of teaching your children how to sew, we're going to be taking a look at the blanket stitch and even using a blanket stitch to make a very simple buttonhole. The project is a pencil case, which I think is going to be something that boys and girls of any kind of age are going to enjoy using, never mind making. It's best actually for something like this if you use a synthetic or a heavier weight of felt, because it'll help keep the pencil case a little bit more sturdy. And of course you can make it any size you like. It doesn't have to be a pencil case. You could make it smaller and make it into a little coin purse. There is a little bit of cutting, so if you're happier doing the cutting for your child, particularly around the buttonholes or where a sharp pair of scissors is needed to really make an accurate cut, then that's probably going to be a good idea for you. So the materials that you need are your rectangle of felt. I've used an embroidery thread that isn't stranded, but if you do have one that's stranded, they're normally 6 strands, so I'd split those into 2 of 3. But this is a better option really, because you don't need to split them. This is an Anchor pearl cotton, quite a nice heavy weight. So we've got a little buttonhole, we've got the blanket stitch all the way around, and you've got something that is useful. And I think it's quite nice when you are teaching kids how to sew that you allow them to make something that they can use. If your child is a little bit more advanced, then you can decorate this. Remember we made the monster face in lesson 1 when we used a running stitch. You could make a face on the front of here. You could decorate with a running stitch, or you could even decorate by adding extra buttons if you like, so, or even initials. So you really can make this personal if you wanted to. So okay, here's a list of all of those materials. Let's get them all ready, get your kids worked up, and we'll get sewing. To help me sew in a straight line, I'm going to draw a line just near the top of my fabric. And I'm using a chalk pencil so I can brush the line away afterwards if I need to. I've taken my needle and thread and I'm going to tie a knot in the opposite end of the needle, just like we did with the running stitch. And then take your fabric and you're going to bring your needle up from the back straight through where I drew the line. Pull it all the way through. Now I'm going to make a loop. So take the thread to the top, put the needle back into the line, but I'm not going to push it all the way through this time. I'm going to push the needle up like so, and then the top of my thread is going to wrap around the needle like that. Then I'll pull the needle through, and you can see I've got the loop around the thread. So do it again, put this into the line, bend the needle up, make sure the thread here goes around the back of the needle, and then just pull it through like this. And it starts to look a little bit like a row of bricks. So try and keep the distance here around about the same. So again, needle in and out, make sure this thread goes around the back and push it through. Don't pull it too tight, otherwise you're going to get the edge of the felt all gathering up. And if you do go in and out and you think, oh no, I didn't loop the thread around the needle, it's not a problem, because now I can put the needle back under the loop and rethread it through. And then just arrange that stitch so that the edge of the felt is covered in a stitch. So in, out, loop around, pull. In, out, loop around and pull. Now you can make these stitches smaller if you want to. So we're going to go halfway down now, loop around and pull, and we're going to make a much smaller stitch. Sometimes your thread is going to be twisted, but that's okay. We can always untwist that again. So closer together this time, go in and out, loop around and pull. in and out and loop around and pull. Now this is a nice stitch if you're going to decorate something, but if you're making a seam, and that means that you're sewing two pieces of felt or fabric together, you can use this to make the seam as well. So it's a nice stitch to sew with, and it's a nice stitch to decorate with. Shall we go even smaller? Let's try a tiny stitch. So I'm going to go very close to the last one, loop around, pull, in, out, loop around and pull, in and out, and loop around and pull. I'm twisting up a little bit, so I'm just going to roll my needle so that the twists go away. Now when you're making a tiny blanket stitch like this one, this is the stitch that you can use to make buttonholes. And that's what we're going to use on our pencil case. So there's my piece of felt. I also have a button, and I'm going to use a plate because I want to make one side of my pencil case curved. So I'm going to put my plate on top of my felt and make sure that it's right in the middle, and I'm just going to draw around the top of the plate like this. And then I'm going to cut round that line. And then to make my pencil case, I'm going to fold over the bottom by thirds. And when I fold over the top, that's how it's going to fasten. So here's 1/3, and here's another third. They don't have to be exact. So you can fold this until you're happy with the way that it's going to look. I'm going to sew a blanket stitch across the top of here, and that's just to decorate it. And then I'm going to sew another blanket stitch all the way around the edge here. So where I've got two pieces of felt, that's going to make a seam because that's sewing two pieces together. And then when I carry on sewing around here, that's to decorate. And then when there's two pieces of fabric together, that's a seam again. So I don't need that folded over for now. And just like before, I'm going to put my needle in, bring it out, wrap around, needle in, out, around, and pull. And make the stitches nice and even. If you want to draw a line again to make sure you're sewing in a straight line, then you can do. And if your stitches aren't exactly the same distance apart, don't worry, it doesn't really matter. So let's just sew all the way around the top, and you can see how quickly, once you start sewing, you can make this happen. When the short part of your thread gets too close to the stitch, you need to pull your needle away from it to make that shorter, so we're not sewing over the top of the end of the thread. And remember, your thread will get twisted, so every so often you need to roll the needle to untwist it. Now when I come to the end of my row, I want to tie a knot. So do you remember when we were making a running stitch, we had a knot in the end? I'm going to do the same here. So that's my last stitch. I'm now going to turn this over to the inside, and I'm just going to put my needle in and out at the bottom of the stitch So I haven't even gone all the way through the felt. Then I'm going to wrap my thread around 2 times and pull the needle through. Then I have a nice secure knot on the end and snip that thread off. So that's how the front of my little case is looking at the moment. So the second thing that I need to do is to do a blanket stitch all the way around the top. So I'll take a nice long piece of thread, thread my needle. Now I don't want to see the knot on the outside, so I'm making a crease line with my fingers so I know where to fold that. And I'm going to open it up and I'm going to put my first stitch inside that crease mark on the inside of my pencil case and pull the thread all the way through. And then I can fold back over onto the crease again and then start to sew. And then you can't see the knot from the outside. So remember, this time I'm sewing through 2 pieces of felt. So start with the thread up, in, out, loop around and pull. In, out, loop around, pull. And do this all the way around the top of the case. In, out, loop around, pull. In, out, loop around, pull. Make that stitch nice and straight. In, out, loop around, pull. Now I can see that I'm running out of thread. I need to put some more thread in my needle. So I'm going to make a knot on the inside again, just like I did before. So at the moment I've just looped around and pulled. I'm going to make 1 stitch over the top of the corner, like that, look. So where I looped around, that's now fastened to the top of the felt. And then just on the inside, just over the top of that stitch, I'm going to go in and out, but not take my needle all the way through to the front. And just like before, to tie a knot, I'm going to thread or wrap my thread around 2 times, hold onto it and pull the needle through. And then I've got a little knot, but it's on the inside of my pencil case, so I can't see it. And cut that off. Then we'll put another piece of thread onto my needle. Tie a knot in the other end. And I'm going to cut the thread off very close to the knot so I don't have that long tail sticking off. And then I'm going to carry on sewing. So I'm going to go just inside the top of that last stitch, like that, and then carry on sewing. So needle in, out, loop around and pull. And then from the front of my pencil case, it doesn't look like I've actually stopped and tied knots and started again. It looks like I've just carried on stitching with the same thread. Now when I come up to the end, again I want to put my knot on the inside, not on the outside, so we don't see it. So there's my very last stitch. I've just caught the end of the felt, so I'll move the thread over. Now this time I want to take the needle inside, so I'm going right into the top of the stitch. Be very careful, but you can feel when the needle comes through to the inside, but be careful if your needle is sharp. And then I'm going to turn this inside out, just so I can see where that last stitch is. And just like before, make one stitch, needle in and out, but don't pull it through. Wrap your thread around that needle 2 times and then pull it through. And then my knot's on the inside, so no one's going to see it. So now I'm going to make the buttonhole. So there's my button, so I know how big the hole needs to be. It needs to be the same size as the button. And I want that to sit right in the middle of that round flap. So the way that we make or mark the middle is to fold this in half, and I can make a crease line. So when I open it up again, I've got a line where the middle is. So I'm going to put my button about there. So not right up to the edge, but just a little way away from the edge. And I'm just going to put a mark each side of my button so I know how big my buttonhole is going to be. And then I can draw a line from one of those marks to the other. And make sure that's nice and straight. And then I'm going to cut a hole. So fold it in half again and make a little snip all the way through, and then cut along the line and cut along the line. And there's my hole for my button. Do you remember I showed you the very tiny blanket stitch? That's the stitch that we're going to put around that buttonhole. And that's going to make the hole nice and strong. So let's thread my needle again. And tie a knot in the end. And like last time, I'm going to cut my thread off right near the knot, so I don't have a long tail of thread. And then I'm going to sew a tiny blanket stitch around the hole. So start on the inside again at one end of the hole. Make the loop, go in and out with your needle, tiny stitches, and pull it through. So try and keep them very small and very close together until you go all the way around the hole. Now when I get to the end of the hole, one more stitch and I'm at the end. I need to turn it around and then do the same along this side. I forgot the loop, but I can thread it back through again. So in and out and loop and pull. In, out, loop and pull. Now I'm back at the beginning. I've got a gap because that's my first stitch and that's my last stitch. So I'm going to take my needle through the first stitch and back to the other side, and that's joined at the stitches all the way around. And then on the inside, guess what? We're going to make a knot. So go in and out, but not all the way through the felt. Don't pull the needle through. Wrap your thread around the needle 2 times and pull. So my knot is on the inside of my pencil case. So now I need to sew on the button. So to make sure I've got the button in the right place, I've folded over the flap where I want it to be. I'm going to take my pencil, and right in the middle of the hole I'm going to put my pencil through and make a dot. And that's where my button's going to go. Just like before, tie a knot in the end of your thread. I'm going to cut a little bit of that off. And I'm going to go inside my pencil case and push that needle up to just one side of the dot. Before I pull the needle all the way through, I'm going to put my button on top. Now I've got 4 holes in this button, so I'm going to make a cross. So I'm pulling the needle through, look, and then I'm going to the opposite hole and I'm pushing it back. And with my left hand, I'm holding the button in place. So now I'm still holding the button and I pull that thread through to the inside. So still holding the button there, I'm going to push the needle from the back and I'm having to feel where the hole is. There's the hole. And bring your thread through and then back into the other side. And I'm going to do it again because that means the button's going to be really strong. So let's go. Where are you? There you are. Through one hole, through the opposite hole, and then in the other top corner and back through that one. Now turn this the other side and we're going to make another knot. So in and out, wrap it around, pull it through, and then I can cut the thread. Now let's make sure that the button goes through the buttonhole. Perfect. Now I can put my pencils in it.